So a real digital twin of Nandagopal Rajan or a Navin Dhananjaya or a Knauf, which is based on their attributes.
Are we running out of real data to train models? Maybe we never had the real data in the first place.
Synthetic panel or synthetic data or synthetic personas has gone where humans kind of stop today.
Be transparent with those involved in this so that we all know that what we're getting is a combination of real and synthetic.
Even in mental well-being, and if somebody is passing through a serious disease treatment, and how does the family behave, and you can't really do what you call a research on that, right? And so that those are personas that you can that can evoke responses for the right kind of treatment or the right kind of counseling.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Our Own Devices. Again, as always, we're going to talk about a new topic. I guess most of you wouldn't have heard about it. Maybe the concept might sort of ring a bell because you'd be able to figure out what we're going to talk about. Yeah, but we have two great speakers to explain to us the concept of synthetic data. And we have with us Navin Dhananjaya, who is the Chief Solutions Officer at Merkle, which is a Dentsu company. And and he's also the global CXM lead at Dentsu Global Services. So joining him is Daniel Knauf, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Merkle. So both of you, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and pleasure to be here.
So um, I guess the concept of synthetic data sort of comes from the fact that we have, quite simply run out of data, right? That you can train your models on. So if you could, for the benefit of the audience, sort of explain what is synthetic data and why are we talking about synthetic data now?
Yeah, why don't I take that one? I think, loosely speaking, synthetic data is any artificially generated data that is meant to mimic something in the real world or some sort of real world statistical properties of a thing without actually coming from real information from that thing. So that could be data that represents, some sort of a collection data set in science, or it could be even data that represents what a human does, says, or thinks.
Is it in a way mimicking, real world data, or is it like lookalike data? How would you, so like, is it a data set which is exactly like something else, but is not maybe attributable in a way?
I'll take this one too. I think when we try to think about exact copies, you're almost like in a different definition, which would be like a digital twin of a person. But when I think of synthetic data, I think about a larger data set of multiple people or multiple things. Again, in the science community, it could be things, not people. And I don't think that we can really replicate or replace what, it was real life information. But you think about all the different attributes about someone like me, Dan, and you think about what I like, my household income, what I buy, you can start to get a representation of who I am in a digital space. And then you can multiply that by thousands, millions, and think about like a community of people or artificial data of people. And that's really what synthetic data is used for at a large scale. Likewise, I go back to like the science community, it could be test results of things that maybe you can't replicate, or things that exist, limited sources of real data to go from. So it doesn't have to be exact. It should actually have some variability to it, but it will never replace me, for example.
So is there a reason why, you guys are talking about synthetic data now? Is it because we have actually used up all the, real life data that we could train our models on, or are there other reasons here?
So maybe I can build on what Dan said.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just data. So Dan said digital twin, right? So one of the reasons, at least for me, to be interested now than in the recent past, more in the recent past than when we initially started using synthetic data, is also the real example of a digital twin of somebody like that. So synthetic profile itself. So a real digital twin of Nandagopal Rajan or a Navin Dhananjaya or a Dan Knauf, which is based on their attributes. So based on, Navin's liking or what I've done in the past or my history available in a customer database within an organization. And the reason for us to at least get more interested in that is, for customer journeys, we need to personalize journeys more for customers to increase or to better their experiences. And to better the experience, we need to do a lot of testing, whether it is campaigns, whether it is new products. And it is always not possible for me to get those 100 Navins in the market to kind of test.
Yeah.
So if I want to test this further, this provides a new opportunity for me to test with a synthetic profile or a synthetic panel to say how Naveen will react or how a panel like Naveen will react to this. So that's another dimension I wanted to just call about.
I think you have to think about the application of what you're using the synthetic data for. So I think that one of the questions is around, are we running out of real data to train models? Maybe we never had the real data in the first place. I go back to a world like in the medical field, for example. I was speaking with a Forrester analyst recently about the use of synthetic data in the medical field, and I got a little uncomfortable thinking, well, what are they going to do to me? This is my health we're talking about. But in rare disease, doctors understand the markers of disease, but they don't have enough cases of the rare disease in real life.
Yeah.
Now they can generate synthetic data using the markers as a way of informing the way that the synthetic data is created, to then train the models to then go find more instances of the real disease. And so you see what we did here is we started with something fake to get something real. And I thought that was a really interesting use case. But in the very opposite end of the life, when we talk about like marketing use cases and customer journeys, boy, sometimes you just need to be able to run a low-cost test, and you can simulate directional output cheaper. And so like the use case is not just different, the purpose behind it is wildly different. And so synthetic data has a very big range in terms of its uses.
I'm just thinking about a use case, based on what you're saying. I run a subscription business, and we are thinking about starting a new product, right? And in the first 3 months, I don't have enough subscribers to have a projection for the next year. But the business demands that I make a projection. So is it possible that I can extrapolate the data and bring in synthetic elements to say that, hey, I have 300 subscribers, but if I get to a 10,000, this is what the panel could look like?
Oh, potentially. I think when you think about the ideation of you're thinking about a new product and you want to test it in the market, and you're simulating the market. What I've seen, and not only what we've built, but what I've done in the past, is marketers come up with ideas all the time. And the brainstorming phase of anything that's new, you might have 100 ideas. You might be using generative AI to create so many ideas, and then you want to run them back through a panel of some kind or a test audience. I think it's a great use of synthetic data to narrow down the field of choices, or be more specific to target what questions you might ask real people. But I don't think that you should completely replace the humans in that data set. You can use the synthetic data methods to just get to a more succinct set of tangible ideas with real humans, and then test it. And then later on, as maybe you've gone past the idea phase now, and you've got like a beta or a prototype or something you're testing with, it would be very sort of use case dependent as whether or not you could really use synthetic data to validate it, because you really would value highly whether or not your real humans are going to buy this thing, and your AI representations or your synthetic data might not skew the same way. So I would be a little more careful there. I think that there's another lens to think about this too, and that is, although synthetic data is a hot topic, if you're using it to fill in the gaps of lack of humans, in this case, we also have predictive analytics, and we have had predictive analytics for a number of years of our careers here. And maybe it's just as good to directionally produce a predictive analytics direction off of a subset of the humans that you have, rather than fill the gap with synthetic data and then measure. So you see, you have to think about very carefully, like how important is it to be accurate and precise with what you're testing. But if you just want something directionally correct or an accelerated point of view, synthetic data might be a faster way to get it. But it comes with the caveats of making sure that the way that your data was generated in the first place has enough attributes, enough variability to it, to be careful about the way that information was crafted. Otherwise, you run the risk of biasing your own results.
So, if you could explain how is this how is this data usually generated? What's the process? What are the techniques you people work with?
I'll take this one too, if you don't mind. So, let's tie that example to a use case just to get a little bit more specific. Let's say that we want to understand. We're a brand and we're putting an idea in the market.
Yeah.
And we're measuring its effectiveness of whatever that, just make up whatever you want, right? But we're taking a measure and we're talking to humans, all right? So if you have a baseline set of humans that you're getting input from, you kind of have an understanding of the range of inputs that you have. But you don't have other things going on in their lives outside of the questions you're asking, right? Humans are variable, they're strange, they're weird, all the fun things. So to create a good data set, it is best to start with a position of understanding a lot of attributes and a lot of data points around what humans do in order to synthesize an audience or a cohort using more information than you think you'll be asking about, because that's what humans bring in real life. So, for example, in Merkle and in Dentsu, we have massive identity solutions that we can tap into to get much more substantial representations of humans. And then we apply that bigger representation to the narrow question set, and we get variability that simulates a lot more like what a human would be.
Just to simplify that, right? I mean, there are three things. I will just say there is this entire trend on data observability that we did with a lot of data, which when I say data observability, we kind of looked at what patterns in data or data sets exist that need to be filled in for better model accuracy. A simple thing could be age. You're trying to segment somebody in ages, say 24 to 30, to kind of launch a new product for that age group. Now, in your data set, age is present only for 30% of your data, 30% of the rows. So if you run a model to segment that, mathematically you can impute values and figure out what it can be, but you need to figure out how synthetically you can add more values to that data set so that more age representation is there and more real age representation is there, so that you can have a better segmentation from that data set. Otherwise, the model will ignore values which are incomplete. And I'm simplifying this, but just to give you an example of one value, right? And the other thing, to just build on what Dan said in terms of, if I look at a local Indian market, you have Blinkit and Zepto and things like that. So if tomorrow I want to do a new Blinkit, say in the Bharatiya City campus, and I want to know how many people, what is the ecosystem or what is the diaspora of Bharatiya City folks who will buy a new product that I'm introducing, say a bouquet of flowers, or for Holige for Diwali or for Yugadi. So if they want to buy Holige for Yugadi, and if I want to know that, there is no way for me to empanel and learn about that. So I can just learn that, okay, executives who work in this are like 50% local, 20% remote, and overall 80% from south of India, and 50% of that population are more likely to buy Holige on Yugadi on such and such a date. So a campaign makes sense. So this, or if you look at that kind of scenario, then a synthetic profile or a synthetic panel may give you that results to ensure that you are investing in the right thing. And if it says that nobody is going to buy Holge because most of them are off and it's a long weekend, then you decide against that campaign, if you get what I'm saying. So that's the intervention that
yeah.
the big data.
So which also means that the synthetic data that you generate needs to go through a lot of validation, right? And also you need to maybe sort of negate the bias, right? Like, because the example you gave, it has a lot of very local cultural elements. Like, I don't know how you generate the data. Maybe it's generated in another part of India, if not outside the country. Then a lot of these attributes won't be there. So how do you validate it? How do you ensure that these kind of biases are not there, or you bring in the local element into it so that you get um, a more accurate response from the data?
Actually, both if you are doing and sorry, Dan, I'll just answer this. You can build on. I know you have some points here as well. I'll just say that the bias exists, and this is early days for using synthetic data for complete decision making. I think Dan covered earlier. It could augment a real panel. So if I want to do
Yeah.
a campaign, I will do a real panel, and to scale it, I'll augment the panel because I know, say, just taking the previous example, I can talk to like 100 people, but I know that there are 100,000 people in Bhartiya city on those 2 days. So it just
Mhm.
me kind of get directional inputs for that. So that's one way of
Yeah.
looking at it. Now, in the past, we've not had this directional inputs. I mean, even directional inputs are good enough for me to invest in that campaign, and even if bias exists. If I am internal to an enterprise and if I have a customer database, I can further train with my customer data or my customer behavior to create that specialized SLM or a small language model from a larger generative model to be more specific to the responses that they can give in my context. So those are 2 points I would make. So to kind of where the direction of the industry is going.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a tough balance of over engineering your data set, which just gives you more sea of sameness, which then begs the question, why did you generate the data in the first place? For example, Navin mentioned, like, why not augment with real humans and real users? You can take a sample set of your data, you can run whatever your experiment is, and you can actually see whether or not, like, in aggregate, your synthetic data representation of users looks the same as your human ones. You can kind of see that they shouldn't be the same, but they should be in the neighborhood. If you're finding wide variances, something is fundamentally flawed with the way that the data was either generated or the sort of the seeding knowledge base that it came from. But there are challenges as well, and that is using like an off-the-shelf LLM. People have researchers, data scientists, people have spent a long time looking at, like, well, what is in the LLM off the shelf and how much bias is it? There was a recent article by Nature, a science magazine, a science journal, and they spent a lot of time analyzing how just sentiments of people have shifted on political spectrums, for example, over time as each model comes out. So there are other examples of these things as well, and then there are inherent biases underlying LLMs. To overcome that, it's a combination of how you're going to synthetically generate your grounding, your scripting, elements that make sure that you're bringing in the other attributes of people's lives that we talked about, and we have data products that allow us the ability to access that kind of information. And then run tests to do comparative analysis to whether or not you're really off the mark or you're sort of in the neighborhood. At the end of the day, you're never going to get precision off of synthetic data. You're going to get something notionally or generally in the same direction. And depending on your use case, you might not need the precision, and it might be good enough, and that's okay.
Well, I'm going to ask a very layman question. Like, so is it possible that, this kind of synthetic data coming into your flows is in the long term going to contaminate a lot of your, um, of your models? Like, so are you going to have these disclaimers that, hey, this was produced with an X percentage of synthetic data or complete not synthetic data? How does it work? I'm just thinking aloud here.
Well, there's two parts to that. I'll take the easy part first, and that is we would never represent something synthetic as real.
Yeah.
Complete transparency in all ways, especially in anything with AI. So that's an easy one to say is, okay, as long as we're all on the same page about what the work product
Yeah.
is, it's clear. But model contamination is a real challenge, right? So if we're using a model and we're grounding data towards it, we can essentially start from scratch every time we reground new data to it. If we're in a situation where we're training a model, that's a much more timely and expensive process. That is really where the risk lies these days. And you see that even with the big LLMs out there, as well as they're worried that we're running out of actual human content and we're just training on AI data. So we have to be really careful to find the right balance for sure.
I think governance in this area will be really important. Model contamination, as well as, I mean, see, a lot of basic models or basic LLMs are able to generate tons of data. So what you said is a real challenge, especially for practitioners, because $1 million decisions on what we conclude as the output of model. So it's very important for us to kind of recommend it in the right perspective and have the right governance in place.
So, on the other hand, it also comes with a lot of new opportunities, right? Because especially when you're talking about customer data and the challenges around privacy, if you're working on synthetic data, you are really not exposing anybody, right? So is that something that opens up new streams of how you can actually, how you can predict, how you can project stuff?
I think that's an important point, and that's definitely an added advantage, because in the synthetic panel, or for synthetic data, or in case, like you said, for humans, you're not really exposing anything, but you do need to have some privacy concerns, because it is a digital twin. If you train a model to tell everything that Navin does outside work, that's not
Yeah.
really what I want the synthetic panel to do. So it has to operate in guardrails. That's one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But the other dimension that it explores, and Dan touched upon it, is synthetic panel or synthetic data or synthetic personas has gone where humans kind of stop today. In the sense, like Dan talked about disease marking, but we are talking about say in EV vehicles, when you need to do, or in any vehicles you need to do crash testing. How does a person react to a sudden crash or an oncoming crash or another vehicle, or the lanes that are changing and suddenly there is a car there? You can't really test this with humans. So you can probably test this with the personas and see how they react, and then figure out what necessary things you need to do. So there, it's a point which kind of transcends where humans stop from a testing perspective. So those are all useful dimensions to consider in the evolving world.
Is that also opening up new ethical concerns? No, I guess you touched upon that in a way, but are there new ethical concerns that you have to keep in mind, which is maybe not there a year back when you were not working with stuff like this?
The ethical concerns have been there over the last 10, 15 years. So even like models or segmentations, if you feed the wrong variables, you'll get segmented it differently, and you need to kind of remove different kind of biases that a model has. So the similar thing is evolving. So I've heard this, for me, having been in data and analytics throughout, I mean, in the last 20, 25 years, there are different phases where I've seen this happen. If you don't model right, and if your data model is not right, it'll create dimensions or measures that will, like, cut the data set differently, right from there to mathematical models, to ML models, to AI models, and now synthetic data. So every time you have a new technology, it does kind of bring this up. The difference here now is, at scale you can create, kind of, call it digital twin, call it synthetic data. So it increases or amplifies the element of ethical good or ethical bad that somebody can do with the data. So definitely some of the measures and governance have to be amplified in how you look at it and how you train the system. It's very important for practitioners to ensure that your trained models can create the right kind of a positive impact for the business, rather than any lines that cross ethics. Dan?
Yeah, I'll plus one to you on sort of the bias amplification challenge that comes there, and the ethical concerns can trace back to that. We're amplifying whatever is in the back of the model if we're not careful. So I agree that that is a concern. That's got something to be tested for. And it comes back to saying, okay, well, what are you using the synthetic data for? Are you using it to steer your business? This is, legitimately, you're going to, move your business based on what you see in the results. That might be a dangerous thing. In fact, probably is. And so it comes back to understanding whether or not the use case is there. I think it also it comes with this sort of false confidence as well. Like, oh man, my synthetic data really proved my hypothesis, and the way that I created my synthetic data was biased, and it was going to prove it no matter what. And then I'm going to make my business decisions based on this. And that's a false confidence that is incredibly high risk. And so I do agree that you have to have some stringency in terms of how you want to apply this type of technology and this type of data to your decision making. That said, it can also help accelerate you in ways that don't harm your business in order to spend your higher productive time or value with real data or real humans in that case as well.
So if I can wind up by asking both of you to list what you think is the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge with synthetic data. Navin, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I captured one already, but for me, the biggest thing is how positively it can impact a consumer journey in different, and it might mean different things to different industries. But the scale and the speed at which I can provide hyper personalized services to individuals or persona is high up on my list, in which synthetic data or synthetic panels can provide inputs for. So that's number one. Number two is it kind of is a little more into the future. Like I would like to explore what we can do where humans can't go. I mean, I'm not talking about areas in terms of hazardous kind of thing, but any hazard where if you want to stimulate using how people behave or how families behave, and it could be very human. I mean, in case somebody is passing, I mean, for example, even in mental well-being, and if somebody is passing through a serious disease treatment, and how does the family behave, and you can't really do what you call a research on that, right? And so that those are personas that you can that can evoke responses for the right kind of treatment or the right kind of counseling. So I think those are two extremes that I would go for in terms of what this data or what this entire synthetic world provides us as an opportunity.
Okay. Dan?
Yeah, I think I think the question is like, what's the biggest opportunity and what's the biggest pitfall? I think
challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest opportunity is doing more. Okay, so more what? It it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's difficult to do a lot of upfront research, whether that be with users or other things, before engaging in the next phase of your business to develop an idea to bring to market, or how you want to evolve it. With synthetic data, I mean, we can really do a lot more bang for the buck in terms of how fast we can move and do more research. And ultimately, the reason we do it in the first place is to make something better, a better experience, a better product, something better for humans. And certainly extending in the medical field for the rare disease case I talked about earlier, that's better for humanity. But the biggest challenge is still that false confidence problem, amplification of biases, using this as a cheap hack because you just don't want to spend the time or the money on the things, even though you probably could, using it for the wrong reasons. There's so many ways that challenges will persist across industries. And so we have to educate ourselves about what it is we're doing, why, and be transparent with those involved in this, so that we all know that what we're getting is a combination of real and synthetic.
So Naveen and Dan, thanks for being on the show, and I'm sure our listeners have learned something new, are thinking of how to apply it in their business. Being very mindful about the challenges and opportunities of synthetic data. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
So we'll be back again next week with another guest, lots more insights and knowledge. Till then, we are available everywhere you listen to your pods.